Well, you're not going to find a more engaging, charismatic, or insightful content maker, commentator, influencer getting into good trouble than Adam Mockler, who's one of my colleagues on the Midas Touch Network, has his own YouTube channel. We decided to do a crossover episode, Popok times Mockler. He doesn't just speak to and for his generation. He speaks to the generations. And I wanted to be together with him so he and I could get together and start talking about things that matter as we prepare for this engagement to get to the midterms, to participate in this participatory democracy. We talk about the budget and the budget bill, not in terms of, oh, woe is me, it passed, but how do we use it against the adversary? How do we use it? How do we weaponize it against the Trump administration? And some other things that we wanted to talk about. So here is one time only, but not the last time, the first time, Mockler times Popok.
I am joined today by the legendary Michael Popok of Legal AF. You've seen him on the Midas Touch Network. Now he has the Popok firm. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Adam. This is a thrill for me. I was so glad when you reached out and said, "Why don't we do something together? We should."
We've been working on the same network for I've been working there for over a year now, and we've never been on camera together. So there's a lot happening in the world of law and politics that we can dig into. Let's start with some of the bigger stories, then we'll go broad and talk about, some of our experiences in the industry. But to dive in, the Senate just passed the big ugly bill, if you want to call it that. JD Vance was the tie-breaking vote. What's standing out to you about this bill and your coverage of it? What are you talking about the most?
I think what we're all talking about, which is you hurt the ones you love, and Donald Trump has found a way to and his voters don't realize it yet, or they don't seem to care about it. They seem to be more focused on cultural issues than how it impacts them. But $1 trillion cut in Medicare and food stamps, that's enough for me. The 11 million people being thrown off the insurance rolls through changes to ACA and different things. That alone, if any Democrat had ever proposed that is the third rail. That would be political suicide and malpractice. But Donald Trump, despite the polls that show he's wrong, despite the fact that the polling is showing that the independents are abandoning him in large numbers, which bodes terrible for him and great for democracy come the midterms, he's just on borrowed time. He knows he's going to be lame duck very, very soon, and he's trying to pay off all of his debts, even if it means rewarding the upper 1%, 0.5% of America, and crapping all over his voters. And they won't realize it yet until they're thrown off of Medicare, thrown off of Medicaid, don't have welfare, don't have food stamps. The ones that argue, well, this is an austerity program, right? We're all tightening our belt. We're not all tightening our belt. There's nobody, the oligarchs and the tax cuts for the wealthiest percentage in this country, and all you're getting in return is no tax on tips. I mean, the asymmetry about this is so devastating. We have to find a way as a party to better communicate to his voters that they have bet on the wrong horse and they're getting kicked in the head.
Yeah, there's also an asymmetry in the permanence of the tax cuts. So the tax cuts geared towards the richest of the rich, they're more permanent and long lasting. Mm-hmm. And then the tax cuts that he's kind of dangling above middle and lower class people, they go away after a few years. Earlier on the live stream, I was live talking to my audience and we were trying to list out everything wrong with the bill. And it was just so much that I couldn't fix it or figure it in one list. It was like flooding the zone in a bill, because even beyond the massive debt problem, they're now trying to create an immigration state. Like the funding to ICE is going to go from 3.4 billion to now 45 billion or so in 2029. Imagine that type of increase. It's wild. And then there's changes to election integrity, slashing of Medicaid, of course, the redistribution of wealth and the permanence of the tax cuts. But there's also massive cuts to green energy. It was like 850,000 jobs are going to be cut from green energy from Biden bills, and then changes to housing and urban development. It's just top down an awful, awful bill. What do you think the way forward is for Democrats to consolidate power? The midterms, people in the comments were asking me, what do we do earlier when I was live?
Yeah. Well, I know we were on pins and needles about whether this was going to get passed after 50 votes and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I wanted it to get passed because not because I endorse anything that's in it,
Yeah.
but because you need to hold the party and MAGA responsible. Follow the money. Now we still have to get through the House, but let's assume it gets through the House. This is their policy agenda. We can talk about esoteric things like Project 2025. It's another page out of Project 2025. That doesn't mean anything. But when somebody goes to a closed door of a Social Security office, or doesn't get their pay, or doesn't get their disability, or their child goes hungry in the red states, right? Or the infrastructure a package that Biden had signed, but now Donald Trump has defunded, means that there's no jobs in their community. This is now codified in the bill. The policy of Donald Trump, the depraved policy of Donald Trump and MAGA, are now there for all to see. Now, it's going to be up to people like you and me, Midas Touch, and the rest to go through the 900-page bill once it's finally become law and explain to people. We got to talk truth to each other first, right, Adam? Right?
Yep.
That's the first thing. We have to empower our audience with knowledge. Once they have the knowledge, then we've got to run the bastards out. There's numbers of ways to do it. I don't want to have anybody just sitting around until the midterm election to take them out and run them out on a rail. We've seen 6-7 million people hit the streets at rallies by 50-51 and other organizations. We need more participatory. We need more participation in our participatory democracy, and we have to like kind of reclaim that. Right? Just the way the Tea Party movement did 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the Democrats, whatever that means to be a Democrat. And you can see from elections in New York, it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. We're not a monolithic party. We're a very large tent party, right? And I'm talking to independents too, and moderates and everything else. Fair-minded people can no longer be the silent majority. We no longer have the luxury of being silent. And so we've got to do that now. And it's not just waiting, like as I said, for the midterms. There are local elections. There are judge elections. You should think about running for something. Run for school board. Run for your local town council. Help, volunteer for an elected official in your community that you think aligns with your values. Help them get elected or reelected. There's lots of things to do. Here is step one: learn, come. Have a fellowship, shoulder to shoulder on your channel, my channel, Midas Touch, and all of that. But then you got to put it into action. And that's what's going to make the difference as we lead into the midterms and beyond.
You know what? I really like the argument you made about this passing almost being a necessity so that people can connect the dots to their vote. Because I think one of the worst things that could happen for democracy is Trump having an absolutely lucky presidency where he sits back and everything glide, like he just able to build off the back of Biden's policies, which were largely good for the economy. I'm not saying, of course, we want bad things to happen, but voters being held accountable for their actions and connecting the dots straight up is the best way to disincentivize people from rolling the dice and voting on another orange freak in the future, right?
Absolutely. Look, we're not the Grim Reaper channel. We're not like hoping for the demise of American democracy but we have eyes and ears. We know that the US dollar is the worst it's ever been since 1973. We know that confidence in the American economy is at its lowest ebb. We know that 67% of Americans in a recent poll, including 70% of independents, are not proud to be Americans under this administration. So we have to, as you said, pull it together and connect the dots, so that when people go into the voting booth, we never make this mistake again.
Can we pivot a little bit to the Supreme Court? It's been packed with a lot of high-profile cases throughout this term. It's like case after case, just heavy hitters. How have you viewed the direction of the judiciary lately, especially in regards to, there was a recent Supreme Court about there's a recent ruling about the judiciary's ability to rule on executive decisions, and that kind of related to birthright citizenship. So how have you been viewing the direction of everything?
Yeah, I just had a good interview today. It's going to be up on the Legal AF channel with Leah Lippman, a strict scrutiny professor out of Michigan. We were kind of going back and forth about what did we just see? What did we just watch in the last 9 months? And when you
Yeah.
see the statistics, the ones that Roberts will push, it's that, well, only listen to these numbers, Adam, only 4% of the cases were split along ideological lines, but it was 100% of the cases that we cared about.
Yep.
40% of the cases were unanimous. Okay, forget that. Let's talk about the 8-2, the batting 800 in emergency applications by Donald Trump, including about things that matter to us on immigration, on transgender and LGBTQ plus rights, and on birthright citizenship.
Yep.
He had, the only way you could describe this term is that it was a group of MAGA right-wing Republicans who were hell-bent on benefiting a person named Donald Trump. Not so much the presidency, just Donald Trump. And so there's no other way to sugarcoat what we just watched. We said at the beginning of the term, are we watching the rise of the Amy Coney Barrett court? Is she going to be the right, center, moderate, or something on some of these issues? The answer to that is no. No. Donald Trump figured out in the first term over the Muslim ban that if he made emergency applications, it was a way to cleave the Supreme Court, put them into their respective ideological corners, and that would be the quickest path to victory for him, rather than going through the normal route of a writ of certiorari people don't remember, we had 60 other cases that got decided this year as well. But the ones that mattered, where Donald Trump pressed his hand, is the one where he was rewarded for that.
Yep.
So moving into the next term, and we're going to have a lot of things over the summer, a lot of emergency applications. There was just an oral argument at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals about immigration and deportation and the Alien Enemies Act, which, based on the panel, looks like it's going to be a win for Donald Trump back to the United States Supreme Court just this summer. They think we're on vacation now, forget it. They're going to be open for business before the term reopens. So what we're looking at is a Supreme Court that is unwilling to save America from an out-of-control rogue president. And what we think is going to happen is the dissents that are written by Ketanji Brown Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor are going to be read by history as being in the right, as they call out in what's happening in plain sight, which is the destruction of our separation of powers, a presidency that's elevated above all the other branches, and a complete, as Ketanji Brown Jackson put it, a law-free zone that he's allowed to operate within. And even though we're like, God darn it, it's dissent, so I wish they were the majority opinion, dissents matter as well to speak to future lawyers, future law students, and to the future. And a lot of times they're found in the right and they're complimented. This court's going to go down, as I've said before, it's already circling the drain of history, as one of the worst courts I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I've been studying the court for at least 40 years.
Yeah, and to build on what you were saying about them being unwilling to reel in a rogue executive or a rogue president, I would also argue they created the conditions for this with their immunity ruling. I think, was it over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago? I don't know.
No, just a year. It seems longer. But just
I mean, it seems like an eternity. But since then, it's been full of rulings. And like you said, the 4% that matter didn't go the right way. The 4% that Trump was able to put his thumb on, such as, I don't know, the recent ones regarding executive power and courts. I mean, this is an argument I have with my right-wing friends a lot. I have a little group chat of a few right-wing friends, and they happen to be lawyers. So we're always going back, and it's kind of like the most raw form of right-wing arguments, I would say. Like when I listen to Ben Shapiro or whatever, I view that as like probably the most raw form of the arguments. Then when I go to the Trump rallies, it's like a step below because they're just regurgitating everything. But, one time we talked before I was heading into a Jubilee debate in LA, and you helped give me some advice on the Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia case, because I am not studying law. I dropped out of college like a year ago because digital media is something that I'm really devoting a lot of time to. But I want to talk to you a little about your journey overall and what advice you'd have for someone like me. So, like, first of all, when did you know that you wanted to become a lawyer or study law? I know that's
No, that's okay. I actually know. I was fortunate in my upbringing. My dad was a real estate broker and was constantly in law in lawyers' offices for closings and things. My parents were divorced, and my dad used to take me around sometimes to like learn his career. And I would sit, we'd go to like closings, and I'd be around lawyers. And my dad had a lot of lawyers as friends. And I had lawyers. I was the youngest in my family. My mother was married twice. I had older cousins. So some of them were already lawyers, like when I was in high school. So I kind of had that. But when I was 12, I went to a court case. My mother was in a traffic accident and I was a witness and I had to testify. And I didn't like the accident part, but I enjoyed that part of it. And then frankly, everything that I was good at in school, from oral communication to writing to history and civics, as opposed to math and science, where I didn't struggle, but what didn't come naturally to me. The things that came naturally to me also dovetailed well with going to a graduate school that focused on those types of skill set. And so there was never, it was always, I was going to be a lawyer unless I could think of something else better to do. And frankly, my generation, unlike yours, the choices for like professionals were not like they are today. It was either like, are you going to go to Wall Street? And I didn't want to do that. Are you going to be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer? I mean, sure, there's other professions, but that was sort of it in front of me. You don't have what you have today, in the tech world, in the crypto world, and in the AI world, and in the fill in the blank world, social media world, media world. So I didn't have those, that wasn't a thing, like, oh, I think I'll be a podcaster one day.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. So, I did the thing. I went to college knowing I was going to go to graduate school, and went to NYU undergrad. And I was fortunate enough to get into Duke, and I went to Duke for law school, and we're off and running. And I worked for a major firm in New York, one of the firms that bent the knee to Donald Trump, Skadden Arps, and I've done a hot take about that. Rachel Cohen just joined Legal AF, who noisily quit as an associate at Skadden Arps, and then it has become part of the resistance. So that's sort of how I got in and out of law until I met Ben.
How'd you meet Ben? That was the next question. Ago.
So I was a practicing lawyer, like a named partner in law firms for 20, almost 30 years. And then I had an opportunity to go in-house with a client of mine in New York. I went in-house with a company called Cantor Fitzgerald. People now know that Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, was the head of Cantor Fitzgerald. And I was the global head of litigation and employment law for this Wall Street, firm, like 14,000 person firm. Eventually met my wife there, by the way. So there was a good reason to be there.
Yeah.
And I had a case against Ben. Ben, when he was at the Garagos firm, sued one of the parties that I represented, one of the companies, and we resolved the case. But we had a very, we fought hard, zealously for our respective sides. He'll tell you he got the better of me. I'll tell you I got the better of him. But in any event, we had a lot of mutual professional and personal respect for each other. And then I left and went back into private practice after about 4 years. And I was talking to people about what's my next move. I was doing a listening tour about how people saw me, and should I go on my own? Should I join a firm? And Ben goes, oh, wait, you're going out on your own. We want to work with you. So I ended up getting a number of cases co-counsel with Ben. And one of my first cases before I even opened the door was a #MeToo case representing Ricky Garcia, who had been sexually abused by his manager. And we got going and doing cases together. We represented a group of people against Kanye West. And there's now a very famous deposition that I took of Kanye West. So he and I started working together professionally and developed a personal friendship. COVID hits, right? The gate shuts on the world, and we're all working from home or not working at all. And I see Ben and his brothers put together this thing, Midas Touch, as a website. And I see it on LinkedIn or something. And I go, what's this? And he goes, oh, it's just like a goof. My brothers and I were unemployed. My brothers and I are unemployed. My brother used to work for, Brett used to work for Ellen Show, and my other brother, Jordy, was in advertising, and, I'm me, and we're just it's like a goof. And it had like 300 people on it. And I said, well, I'm sort of down right now without trials. I'm a good writer. How about I write for you guys? He goes, oh, we need content. Popok, you got to start writing. So I started writing. I started sending videos from Manhattan about COVID. They started putting it up on the website. And then he forms the Midas Brothers podcast. And about right around the same time, he says, you want to do like a legal weekly roundup with me? And I'm like, Okay. So we just start, with COVID hair, pandemic hair, we start screaming into our laptops, no microphones, no nothing. And we start doing this thing called legal roundup, you know, and we didn't have a strike zone. We were just doing everything, then politics, not politics. And then it became clear that there was this intersection of law and politics, that if we pounded that strike zone, there'd be an audience. And that became special edition of Midas Touch once a week on Wednesdays. And then after about 6 months, Ben's like, we got to fly the coop. We got to fly the nest. And he and I went back and forth on names. I came up with Legal AF, and the rest is history.
It wasn't quite legal as fuck off the bat, but it got there. It grew into it.
Yes. I mean, it was always that, what you just said, but Ben never wanted to declare it that. So,
it is always crazy how things work, or like the way things come together. I always think that connections compound in almost a butterfly effect way, where like I have one connection that I built off of a Twitter DM 2 years ago, and then that connection loops back around to build the next chapter of my career. So that's always interesting to me. Yeah. I guess I just want to end this off with a quick question regarding something I'm really interested in as someone who's kind of been scaling a business. And originally I got into this as content. It was just pure, like, how many videos can I post a day? But then you start really focusing on the back end and scaling contractors, having editors, and building out a show. What are some tips that you give on overall negotiation to someone who's let's say, a 22-year-old young business owner? What are your tips on negotiation?
You mean negotiation between you and the vendors, or you and
I mean, just like overall, I think that something that really interests me is that Ben Meiselas teaches a class entirely on negotiation.
Yeah.
I've always found that to be very unique. Like, what would you teach?
All right. Well, I would do, I'm all lawyers that have been doing it as long as I have to be consummate negotiators. But for you in the business world, I think you first have to understand what your strength and competitive advantage is, and always remember that you have the leverage in your negotiations, because these people want to or need to work with you, right? Not the other way around. Never let the tables emotionally be turned on you, where somehow you're made to feel that either these people are on a level playing field with you. If you're hiring them, I mean, if you want to get something from them, of course, maybe it's a little bit more of a give and take.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking to onboard or bolt on talent, channel build out, or for you, these other vendors, you always have to keep the power on your side, right? You always have to keep the advantage to you. And that influences how the vocabulary that you use, the body language that you use. I'm not saying you have a take it or leave it approach, but you have to go in a little bit hard-nosed. It may be different than the persona and your natural qualities that shine in your content. But you now have to, yes, I'm all about collaboration. Look, I've got a channel, Legal AF, that has over a dozen contributors on the channel. We got Court Accountability Action. We got Rachel and Tiara Mack. We've got, Sydney Blumenthal and Sean Walentz, and they're all different. So you also have to recognize what their needs are, that you can try to accommodate, but it always has to be within the deal terms or the conditions that you want to drive. You have to have a clear sense in going into the negotiations what your ultimate optimal outcome is, right? Write it down if you have to. Remember what it is. And then, yes, you can navigate around that. But by the time that phone call is over and you're moving into some sort of handshake deal or some sort of agreement, you better make sure that you've advanced your leveraged position to accomplish your deal points. Because if you have a deal that doesn't accomplish your deal points, then what deal do you have at all? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's something I've had to build too, is being like interpersonally assertive. Yeah. When it's really weird, because I can go out on the field to these Trump rallies and I can have Mike Lindell shout at me, completely hold my cool. Yeah. And then sometimes when I'm in a negotiation with even like an ad or like an ad read management company, a vendor, I don't know, I've gone through a lot of contracts over the past 4 months, and I've really built the now interpersonal assertive skill of just saying what I want off the bat, setting the expectations. Right. And yeah, I totally agree with what you're.
I'll give you one more. For your magic bag. One more for your magic bag. Okay. Silence can sometimes be your greatest negotiator, right? I've learned that. Okay. Don't talk too much, and don't try to fill in and we're talkers, right? We're natural talkers.
Yeah.
and we do it for a living. We get paid to do it for a living. So sometimes you want to like jabber your way through when there's this awkward moment. Let the awkward moment sit there. The next person that speaks loses effectively. You understand? You understand. As I see you're laughing about it.
I'm laughing because this is something I've been just starting to practice, and it's so effing true. Like, it's so true. There's so many times, let's say when I was a naive 21-year-old before I turned
last year.
Yeah, last year,
right.
Where I would be on the call and there would be that moment, and I'd be like, or not, if you don't want, like, that's fine. Like,
right.
Completely not assertive. And no, lately I've been asserting myself, and it's as you grow, as you really know what you want, and you have to have clarity going into it. That's what I've learned over the past year. A lot of clarity going into it, and then you can establish your boundaries and get what you want. But yeah, I'd love to continue talking about this over time.
Absolutely.
Great chat. I really liked how we talked about overall news, talked about some career stuff. Let's do it again.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have you over on Legal AF as well.
Let's do it ASAP. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome back. You can find Adam Mockler on his YouTube channel at Adam Mockler, Mockler, just what you thought it would be. And of course, you're here on the Legal AF YouTube channel. Hit the free subscribe button here as well. You can catch Adam's work throughout the Midas Touch network and ecosystem. And then we're going to get him back here. He'll be a regular contributor with us here on Legal AF. And I'll join him as much as he'll have me on his channel at Adam Mockler. Until my next hot take or contribution, take a moment, hit the free subscribe button here on Legal AF. I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.